Welcome to CEO Interviews, a production of Agoracom, in which we take the time to interview CEOs and executives about small cap public companies, about exciting news at their companies, and what's going to be going forward. With us today, I'm happy to have again James Briscoe. He's CEO and president over at Liberty Star Uranium. The company trades under the stock symbol LBSR, and you can find them on the web under the domain libertystaruranium.com, and is of course always on Agoracom by punching their name or stock symbol, where you'll find all the previous interviews that Jim and I have done. Now, for those of you who are new to the company controls properties which are located over what management considers some of North America's richest mineralized regions for copper, gold, silver, moly, and uranium. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you, George. I trust you had a Merry Christmas and a good New Year's Eve and New Year's Day.
A great Christmas, a great New Year. We're all blessed, and I wish you and yours, as well as everyone at Liberty Star, a fantastic 2017.
Well, thank you very much. Boy, what a pair of holidays it was, plus the Trump election thrown in, and a lot of angst
and now it looks like everyone's pretty anticipatory, especially in the resources space, about what's going to be taking place. I know a lot of small cap resource companies are really excited about the pending reduction in regulation and all those really constraining rules that made it difficult. So this is part two of the three updates that comprise your CEO year-end update. So you want to get straight to it?
Yes, and you're exactly right. Everybody was and is very excited, and the repercussions are still bouncing around the United States with lots of optimism about projects that have been delayed for a decade, specifically the Rosemont camp area, and I'll say more about that in my next interview. But even around the world, people are exulting and freeing up money and working on projects. The job market here in Arizona, I look at those job openings every day just to see what's happening, and people are putting lots of jobs to work.
Today it was announced, I don't know if you saw it, but small business optimism is the highest it's been since 1980. So that pretty much tells you everything you need to know about what's in store for small business, and in our case, small caps, and that people are feeling really good. So I think, Liberty Star shareholders and all of us have a lot to look forward to, especially with what you're announcing here. So here's a question I want to get straight to. In your year-end update, that just came out, you mentioned new financial interests and some of the global companies looking at Hay Mountain. So what is about Hay Mountain that's causing this interest right now?
Well, I think that we're continuing to perhaps clarify, and we're continuing to discover areas of mineralization within the main Hay Mountain anomaly, which is composed of both vegetation geochemistry and very exquisite ZTEM geophysics, EM, and magnetics provided by Geotech, which is located right outside of Toronto, as you may be aware. And it really defines the porphyry copper as we had hoped to see it over the magnetic anomaly, which was detected many years ago, but with analog devices, and now we have a digital magnetics and see it much more clearly and precisely. So we think that some of these talks will bear fruit. We don't know in early stage discussions, but it's always nice to have the phone ringing more frequently than it has in a long time.
And that's the key, right? And that, in fact, what was so dormant for so long, suddenly people are starting to make phone calls, and I think it's nice to know that Liberty Star is at the top of that list, because now as if you're getting calls in October of 2017 you're getting them just in December of 2016, in January of 2017. So it's got to tell you something about Liberty Star being higher up on people's lists.
Well, with all of the things that President-elect Trump is planning and talking about, it's going to take a gigantic amount of raw material, and that's going to include copper and zinc and lead and molybdenum and rare earth metals and all the things that we have at Hay Mountain, and in addition to lots of sand and gravel and rock, all mine material, and everybody's ramping up to take advantage of that.
So let's go into the back to your update. You've gone back to some of the basic geology and science of the Hay Mountain project as it relates to potential future mining. Can you explain the quote-unquote zone characteristics of porphyry coppers related to the potential of segregated metal production? And we're putting up a graphic here, but it sounds complex, and if you give us a short explanation, including what we're looking at in the diagram, that would be really helpful here.
All right. Everybody that's involved in metals exploration was electrified when in 1970, J. David Lowell of fame throughout Canada and Latin America, Dave has been, and his family had been a pioneer family right here in Tucson, Arizona. And he got intrigued with copper mining and uranium mining early on. And of course, Dr. Gilbert, John M. Gilbert, who has written the book on mining exploration. And in the late 60s, early 70s, while I was at Silver Bell, they were drilling along on what was called the Kalamazoo Project. And it turns out it was a porphyry copper line on its side, which made it possible to drill through the sides. And if you can look at that graphic and imagine going horizontally, in this case it was vertically because the deposit was on its side already. But by drilling 4,000-foot holes, which nobody ever told the oil funders that were funding Dave Lowell that you shouldn't drill deeper than 1,000 feet or two in porphyry coppers because. And so they were very happy to drill 4,000-foot holes. And what Dave and John, who did the microscopy and scientific work, discovered was that there was layers, and these layers are illustrated in color in two companion diagrams, A and B, which are actually the same thing, but it really gets complex if you combine the metals with the alteration. So the U.S. Geological Survey has re-illustrated what a porphyry copper in a homogeneous rock looks like. And on the left, those are alteration minerals, and because they're in geospeak, they seem complex, but they're not all that complex. The big thing is the potassic central zone, and then the phyllic, which is essentially a clay layer, and the propylitic, which is essentially pyrite and a green mineral called epidote. It's very easy to identify. And associated with those alteration minerals is illustrated on B, which shows the minerals that occur with the alteration. And those are in shortened abbreviations. CP stands for chalcopyrite, GA is under where it says peripheral, and then CpGAl is galena, Si is silica. Don't worry about that, but just look at the graphics or the general outline of the layers, because every porphyry copper district or every porphyry copper deposit in the world is like this. Some of them may be very small or very big, like La Escondida, where J. David Lowell made more than $1 billion in royalties so far by his discovery of that. Although my old mentor, James Harold Courtright, who I got the art and science of leach capping from, had a big hand in that. He actually picked the drill holes. So at any rate, we know this because this was really discovered and published in 1970, which is now almost 50 years ago. And it's been drilled, many porphyrocoppers have been drilled and recognized to have these characteristics. So when we went out in the field and took vegetation geochem, which we'd already tested at Silverbell, and I'll go into a little bit of that, we saw these metal zoning patterns, and then when we flew ZEBTEM, again by Geotech, whom I had suggested this was the best tool for porphyrocoppar exploration, what they have done is flown 42 square miles. Well, actually, they've flown more than that, but at any rate, over Hay Mountain is 42 square miles. And what we come up with are things that we can liken to the model. Now, I will say that it's not quite as simple as portrayed here, because in this area, we have layered reactive sedimentary rocks, limestones, dolomites, and siltstones, and other things. And some of the limestones are very reactive and make high-grade copper. And that's so complex that we simply can't show it here. But at any rate, we can compare the nearby Bisbee deposit. We know what happened down there in a very similar porphyrocoppar. So that's where we are. We know the zoning. We know that when we see with the X-ray fluorescence that we get potassium and molybdenum and chalcopyrite, we know that we're in the center of the zone, and that corresponds with our geochemistry and our geophysics. So hopefully that's an explanation that might be understood by some, and I welcome any calls if somebody wants to ask me specifics on that. So
it's always
there you
go. It's always easier to go with someone looking at the illustrations and having you talk about them. Next question is, let's talk about some of the other metals potential Hay Mountain. Like, for example, you mentioned specifically zinc and manganese.
Yes, that's right. The metals are also arranged in a concentric fashion. If you look at the illustration and just realize that if you turned it around an axis, it would be like a popsicle of the olden days, where you had different layers of ice cream in them. And if you licked on one of the layers, pretty soon you'd lick through it and see the next layer. And then if you actually cut off the top of that popsicle, there's one kind of a popsicle that had a multitude of layers. It was kind of like a bullet, and it kind of looks like a porphyrocoppar miniature deposit. So if you cut across that, you would see bullseye type patterns. And within those patterns, we have, from the center, we have molybdenum, gold, silica, potassium, and iron pyrite. And then as we move out, and that's the low-grade core, and as we move outwards, we get more of copper with molybdenum, and then as we move further out, we get less moly and more copper, and then as we move further out, we get copper with increasing amounts of zinc, and then the next layer out, we get zinc, and then zinc and lead, and then zinc and lead and manganese, and then zinc, and then manganese and silver. And further out, we get other metals, including uranium and thorium and silver generally, and gold, and mercury, and antimony, and gallium. All, unless you remember your high school chemistry, if you took it, these seem like unusual names, but they're just part of the periodic chart. And so we knew where to expect these by our work at Silver Bell, and when we did the vegetation geochem and plotted it all up with computers, there it was. The importance of that is that, and I'll make a big leap forward into the idea that we can mine separate zones within the mine to be at Hay Mountain, depending on the copper price and other metal prices. And I will point out that all porphyry coppers have uranium in them. Bisbee recovered uranium during high uranium prices. Silver Bell had it, but didn't recover any. Twin Buttes, which is just south of Tucson, had uranium and recovered uranium. And so this is not a surprise. This is just something that comes along with the territory. And in fact, we used to get most of our platinum and palladium from porphyry coppers. Now there's cheaper sources in Africa. So there we are. We've got at Hay Mountain, we've got a porphyry that's about 7 miles long and about 4 miles wide, and it has all these metals zonally arranged.
So in your discussion here, Jim, about zinc and manganese, there have been some technological developments in the ability of zinc manganese batteries to be recharged that might make them much more valuable today. You want to expand on that a little bit?
Sure. Zinc manganese batteries go back well over 100 years, and I would believe that any kid, particularly if you were a boy or were a Boy Scout, had a flashlight or 2 or 3. I was always fascinated by flashlights and low voltage electricity. But when the batteries were discharged, they could not be recharged. So you just threw them in the trash and bought another one. And the battery itself was quite cheap because zinc was pretty cheap, as was manganese. But recently, some researchers have done metallurgical submicroscopic examination of zinc to find out why it wouldn't take a charge or a recharge. And they have found out the microscopic structural reason for that, and they have been able to alter it. So now they have, and I hope I didn't say zinc. If I did, I meant manganese. But at any rate, so the manganese is now altered, or can be altered, so that it will take a charge. And so you can recharge a zinc manganese battery up to 5,000 times, which if you compare it to your smartphone battery, which will take about 300 charges, and then you have to throw it out and get another one at quite a bit of expense. But the manganese zinc batteries will recharge 5,000 times, which strikes me that they might be a better source of power for a whole variety of things than lithium. But that remains to be seen, because so far they're not commercial. But if that comes to pass, then the price of zinc, which is already going up because of the construction that the Chinese are doing, and they've been doing this for a long time. They galvanize all of their bridge steel structures so it won't corrode. And we'll do that, I hope, the next time around. And so there will be a bigger market and a bigger consumption of zinc. and the manganese, and we would know where in the deposit in kind of approximate terms, but we'll define that by drilling. So if it turns out that zinc goes to a very high price, we know where to go in the mine, and we will do that. So this is what I mean by a zonal relationship and marketing for that effect. And so if copper is high and molybdenum is high, we'll concentrate on those portions of the ore bodies. And if it's zinc and manganese, we can go there. And if it's molybdenum, we can go there. And if it's gold, we have a gold zone. If it's uranium and thorium, we can go there, and so forth. So these porphyry coppers are massive chemical systems that have arranged themselves in very specific orders for chemical and physical reasons, and they can be segregated out in the mining, and we have identified equipment that will allow us to do that. So we're looking forward to a future where many vehicles will be automated and powered with electricity, and the cheaper or the greater endurance of the batteries, the better it's going to be. And so this involves not only automobiles, but big trucks, underground mining equipment, and all of that is going to take lots and lots of copper and probably a lot of battery material, which could be zinc and manganese.
You made it clear that the Hay Mountain project is Liberty Star's number one. We know that, number one priority. But you're also talking about some of the new projects. I'm very interested about that part of the conversation. That intrigued me. You're talking about some of the new projects and new targets that could come into play. So could you go over a couple of those for us and where they are? And we're putting up a graphic here. We're calling it the Great Cluster.
Yes. Well, the Great Cluster of copper and gold was defined by the U.S. Geological Survey, and when I first started, it was thought by some that all the copper was on the American side of the Mexican border, and then those that thought that was ludicrous talked about the borderline fault, and no copper was located in Mexico. Well, that's not true at all, and of course, Arizona has silver and gold deposits, and Mexico has copper and moly deposits and silver and gold, and so we have a huge area that stretches in southern Arizona and southwestern New Mexico and northern Mexico. And so when we were involved with all the permitting that we've had to do at Hay Mountain, which there wasn't much else we could do until all those permits were done. So I started looking around through various data, and I will tell our investors and others that I have a literature collection that I have housed in a Fruhoff trailer with 770 feet of bookshelf, and it's just chucky jam full with my reports and other reports and published reports and so forth. So I have a gigantic database in which to do literature exploration, which is important, as well as now there's lots and lots of stuff on the internet. So I was rummaging through some of this data, and I remembered a deposit that I had looked at in 1973. And we're going to call it, for convenience, Copper Mountain, because I recognized that this deposit had potential for turning into a mine, but it was owned in a complex way, and the company I was working with didn't have the money to really pursue it. So even though I estimated about what has later been proven, I was not any longer involved in it, but it has been drilled out and metallurgically tested and found to be easily recoverable, and there's about 200 million tons of ore grade copper. And the entity that owns it cannot see a way to put it in production. We do. And we will move in that direction as time and finances permit. And we have a special approach that will make this viable and particularly profitable and open pit mineable. And it should produce approximately $8 billion in cash flow at $4 a pound copper, and copper's pushing towards $3 a pound. I think we're going to be seeing $4 before very long. Now those are gross figures and don't include mining and ancillary costs or taxes. But because of our operational plans, which are, I think, pretty magical, we think we're going to get a very high profit margin, perhaps a 45% return on investment before taxes. And the very mining of this body will expose additional large ore tonnages of good to high grade. And this will be very remunerative if we can purchase it. So that's the end.
Let's make sure the person who owns it right now isn't listening.
Well, I haven't been very specific about where it is, so
yeah, of course.
that's the reason. And secondly, another deposit, which I'll call Copper Hollow, as just a chosen name to disguise its location, was a byproduct of a trip about 10 years ago. And I did see some familiar features that I thought were interesting, but it didn't seem particularly compelling at the time. But more recently, I've looked at some space imagery, and I've done an awful lot of, well, first aerial photography, which I learned in college. And I soon found out that it was a waste of time to go out on an exploration trip without proper aerial photography. So I did a whole lot of that. Actually formed a company to do that, and now we have wonderful space imagery that's better and cheaper, et cetera, et cetera. So I looked at Copper Hollow again and saw that there was an oval basin there which has copper and gold veins in it, which I had seen before, but the perspective was completely different. So I am convinced that that is a porphyry copper as well. It has a variety of characteristics that I'm familiar with, and if you understand them, you can very quickly make decisions to either do more work or forget it if it doesn't have those characteristics. This happens to have it, and it covers about a square mile. We would do, it's also on private property, so we have to get that. We have to purchase it or get a lease option. And we would follow the same course as we have at Hay Mountain, and that is vegetation geochemistry, but there's also soil and rock, in this case, that can be sampled, and ZTEM geophysics. The geochemistry and the ZTEM geophysics gives us what the metals are, and the geophysics tells us how deep they are. And this would probably be an underground operation, although it might not be. And it's about a square mile in extent. It also happens to have lower Paleozoic limestone sediments, which are the target at Hay Mountain and were the targets at Bisbee, Arizona. And it could have a very large tonnage and high-grade material in it. So we're not letting the grass grow under our feet. So we have multiple targets in the Tombstone area. These are far, far away, but are also additional targets. And there's no reason that we can't work on all of them if the funding is available. And with changing economics, this may be the time, maybe the best time in the last 100 years.
We still have part 3 coming of your update. and it'll probably be better characterized as the New Year update looking forward. But can you give us a preview of what you plan to talk about for part 3?
Well, yes, kind of. Things are happening so rapidly and so optimistically with Trump's business approach to the business of the United States, which a prior president, and it may have been Herbert Hoover, but I don't want to say specifically, but this person said the business of the United States is business, and that's Trump's approach. And when we talk about rebuilding the infrastructure, which is horribly decrepit at this point, we're talking about just a lot of basic earth material, including copper and steel and molybdenum and rock and cement rock. All of these things are located here in Arizona. They can, if they're economic, they can be mined, and certainly copper, moly, lead, zinc, gold, silver, manganese, even uranium and rare earth elements. We need all of that stuff. So yes, we're very excited about that. And part of the problem in the last few decades has been a society that has been bound up in overregulation and bureaucracy that expropriates land areas, even though there's literally billions and billions of dollars of resources on them. And I think that that at the rate things are going, I think that we may get rid of a lot of the overbearing bureaucracy, the gigantic money's gone to overregulation and unneeded studies, and we will grease the ways for lots of mining. And so I'm putting that together. One of the things that is happening just last Sunday, when I decided that I would go ahead with number 3, because I thought, well, maybe I've already spent enough time, but the Rosemont camp, which is about 25 miles southeast of Tucson, has been delayed for 10 years beyond when it should have been permitted. Now, in the Sunday paper, it was announced that the final decision on permitting will not be done during this administration, but will be postponed until Trump takes office. So everybody hopes that this deposit, which we are told will be the 3rd largest porphyry copper deposit in the United States, will go into production, we hope.
And that would be just fantastic for Liberty Star, because it's going to bring all that attention back to Arizona. Even though you're in different jurisdictions from the Rosemont, which is good news for everybody, it's still just 25 miles away.
That's correct. And we are in Cochise County, which is very, very mining and agricultural centric, so that the population there is anxious for jobs and anxious for new mines. Bisbee was the biggest thing in Arizona for many, many years, and that is now shut down, and it's been very difficult for Cochise County to exist with not much income coming in. This would be very, very welcome, I believe.
All right, Jim. So we're looking forward to sitting down and talking to you about the future, because I think that's going to be a great conversation, because for the first time in a long time, we can all actually listen to that conversation with great enthusiasm and optimism, as opposed to wishing and hoping and praying. So, if anybody knows about, the future in that area, in the future, what's going on with copper and all these great metals, it's you. So thanks for joining us so much today here. You're the best communicator we know in the small cap space. It's amazing how you go out of your way to discuss such detail with the shareholders and the investment community, and we're looking forward to part 3 with you.
Well, thank you, George. And even though many of the laymen don't understand these details, there's lots of information in our website as to explain what they mean. And of course, for geologists listening, they know what I'm talking about, and that's important.
Well, I think you've done a good job of putting into layman's terms as well as you can. Naturally, there are just some barriers you can't cross because it's still geology at the end of the day, but we're all smarter for these conversations that we have with you, and looking forward to the next one. You've been listening to James Briscoe. He's CEO and president at Liberty Star Uranium. The company trades on the stock symbol LBSR. You can find him on the web at libertystaruranium.com, and of course on Agoracom. Punch in the company's name or stock symbol. Get engaged in fantastic conversation with other Liberty Star shareholders. Ask questions, get your answers, and get caught up to speed with all the due diligence reporting that we've been doing and those great shareholders have been doing over the last several years. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a fantastic day. Make sure you go to Liberty Star right now as soon as the interview's done, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.